Hi, I'm Josh Hockman with Park Industries Customer Service. On this video, we are going to show you how to replace the brass nut on a Yukon. So to start out with here, this is an operational machine, so we are able to move our Z-axis up and down. So we have ours all the way in the up position to give us the most room on the backside. If your brass nut failed and the Z-axis dropped down, you are going to want to try figuring out a way to be able to raise that Z-axis up. If your brass nut completely stripped out, you might be able to take a crane or some other lifting object and lift that Z-axis up. Once you do get your Z-axis up, you do want to support it. So here we are over the table. So I'm going to just use a block of wood, and we have set up a bottle jack on here, and we're not going to put a lot of pressure. We're just going to lightly push off on that arbor just to hold that from dropping anymore, because once we get everything up top removed, the motor and everything in the gearbox are holding the rise and fall up. So once we pull that out to replace our brass nut, then if you do not support it, then it will drop on you. So always make sure you support that tight. Make sure your supports are set up in a good spot also. Just right on the bottom side of the arbor, make sure the jack and everything is centered on that so it does not kick out. Then we'll power down here and we'll move to the back side of the machine and show you how to remove everything and replace that brass nut. Okay, now that we're on the back side of our Z-axis assembly here, we are going to start with removing the bolts of the brass nut here. So one thing to keep in mind is the brass nut, the hole is not centered. So I have a new nut here. You can see how the hole is not centered on that brass nut. So make sure to take note of your orientation. This one is that the larger side is towards the back of the machine. So just make sure you remember that. That's how most of them should be, but double check yours just in case. So then we will start with removing Just going to get everyone loose here first. I'm going to remove my grease line so I don't forget about that. Making sure you don't drop your nuts and washers down into the assembly there. If your bolts are not coming out too easily here, then there's a little too much pressure. If your nut is still good and not completely stripped out, there's a little too much pressure on them bolts. So you can just relieve some pressure down onto them, and then those bolts should pop right out. We'll keep working these here. Okay, right there, they're sliding out. So now I'm able to pull them out. I think I'm gonna wanna come up a little, hang up a little bit more here, making sure my holes line up that I can easily be able to get this bolt out. Right there is where it slides nice. So we can pull the bolt out. Now that my nut is loose, we can, we will then move on to, I like to do the motor next, because now I'm done working in this area. So we're just going to loosen up these bolts. On the motor, I do not unwire the motor. That's up to you if you would like to. Just make sure you, if you do, make sure you mark all your wires so that you can make sure it is wired the same when you wire it back up. If you want, you can leave the motor and gearbox assembly attached together and unwire it. It'll just be heavier for you when you have to lift this whole assembly up and out. The bolts for the brass nut are 3/4 inch wrench you'll need, and the motor and gearbox you'll need a 9/16. Support that motor in there. Now we can give ourselves a little bit of extra room here. And we're just gonna snip some of these zip ties. Just to make sure we're not putting a bunch of stress on this cable here. So that should give us plenty of room. We'll slide this out. Now when you slide it out, watch carefully. There is a key stock on the motor shaft here. So we wanna make sure we don't lose that. And my key stock stayed with the motor shaft. Sometimes it'll stay on here, sometimes it'll stay in the gearbox, but just make sure you don't drop that. We're just gonna set our motor down here and let that sit there. So next, I'm gonna take this proximity sensor off so that we do not hit this prox and break the proximity sensor also. So I'm gonna start by just pulling my wire, unscrewing my cable from the prox sensor. It is a good idea to take a measurement from like the plate to the end of your prox so you can get that prox sensor set exactly in the same spot as before. I'm going to just unscrew my nut from the inside. There's not enough room to push it through the other way. And I'll just hold that together so we don't wreck that. Now the last step here for the removal part would be removing the bolts for that hold the gearbox down to the rise and fall assembly. Once you have everything removed, everything should be free now. So the gearbox with the nut and everything will lift that up and out of here, and the nut will have to spin 90 degrees here to get out. If you want, you can use, if you have an overhead crane, you can use that and cradle that gearbox. Now if I get up a little higher here to be able to get it. We'll just spun that 90 degrees and got that up and out of here. Once you have that up and out of here, we can get our brass nut taken off of our shaft here. Just keep spinning until it comes off the end, if you do have threads left. When you thread your new one on, just make sure you keep in mind which way the old one came off, referencing how the screw assembly is not centered there and the grease fitting. So we'll get this one back on now and just show you the reverse process of how to put everything back together. Also, if your screw did stay in position here, you want to take a measurement, if you can right away, of how far it is from the end. That will help you get your bolt holes positioned correctly to get your bolts through for the brass nut. So now we'll just hop back up and get that. Slide this back in. So now with the reassembly process, first thing you're going to want to do is set this motor off to the side here. Set this off to the side a little more so you guys can see. So my larger side is going towards the rear of the machine. And before you bolt any of this down, you want to make sure that your bolts line up. If those are not lining up, you can slide your gearbox forward and give it a rotation in whichever direction you need to move. Another thing you can do is slowly raising and lowering the bottle jack to get that to into position there. So we're real close. We're going to come up a little bit with our bottle jack. Oh. Down. And we're just going to make sure all four fit in first. And all four bolts slid in very nicely, so we should be good there. And then we are going to bolt down our gearbox then. So there's no stress on anything right now, and making sure my gearbox is sitting flat on the white plate. Not that with the brass nut, it's holding it up in the air. Snug up all four of those bolts. And then I'm gonna just get my nuts started for the brass nut here. So the nuts on the back side where the bolts are. Don't forget the lock washers on these also. All four of them are started. So we will tighten those guys up. You don't have to torque them real hard. It is just brass, so as long as those nuts aren't going anywhere. Once those are all tight and everything, then we will connect our grease line, make sure we don't forget about that. And now we will, since we have good access to our proximity switch, we'll get our proximity switch on there. And then just referencing where your old proximity switch was, the measurement you took on yours, or if you know that that nut did not move, we can just tighten right up to that again. Now, I'm going to make sure my cable's facing down and not pushing up into anything else, and that's in a good spot. We will tighten that back up. And connect our prox cable. And now we'll take our motor. Make sure any twists or anything are out of my motor here. And then just watch your key stock. Make sure that's in there. Slide that in, making sure that key stock stays in, and then just orientating our motor so our electrical box is on the operator's side. And then we can start our bolts for that. May have to wiggle that motor back and forth a little bit just to get the bolts started. So those are started, we'll tighten up everything here. Once your motor's all tight, we can take our zip ties, zip tie our cable back here. Don't forget about the prox cable. Put our zip ties off and just clean up any grease and dirt and everything again. And now we should be able to check our Z height. We should be operational here. So we'll just use the machine. We can Z up. You can also, just to make sure you don't get confused and accidentally Z down, we can Z or take our bottle jack out now, and everything should be supported. You will have to reset your Z heights, and I would also double check to make sure that the Z prox is reading. You should see the position changing in the position screen on the machine. You should also be able to see that this flashes. So, as always, if you have any questions about this, please give our customer service department a call and we'd be glad to help. Thank you.